my my podcast. And today we are going to be talking to this amazing lady, one of a kind, Denise De Stefano. And we had the pleasure of meeting through Facebook. And today, Denise De Stefano, she is going to be taking us on a journey growing up in South Philadelphia and achieving a multitude of milestones. So, which she gives credit to her father's guidance and wisdom on many levels of her life. So I am super excited to bring her on and introduce you. So Denise De Stefano is an entrepreneur, writer, creator, producer, and author. Born and raised in South Philadelphia as a child, her father taught her to think like a man in order to survive, but never to forget she was a lady. And Denise grew up in a world of secrets, which she chronicles in her new released memoir entitled Out of Respect, which is on Amazon. So, a born storyteller, Denise incorporates humor as one of her major coping mechanisms that she used in addition to her relentless faith in God to survive her life journey. She professes this on a mission from God, walking by faith and not by sight. And I'm really, really excited to have Denise here on my podcast, Let's Break the Silence with Angeline, because guess what? We have a voice. Our voices matter. So if you have not liked and subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go right now to Let's Break the Silence with Angeline on YouTube. Like and subscribe. And this podcast episode will also be uploaded onto my Spotify, which is Let's Break the Silence with Angeline. So, Denise, welcome. I am so happy and blessed that you're here with us. And I am really, really excited for this conversation for you to share your transformational journey in your new
Pleasure
book.
to be here. It's a pleasure to
Yes.
be here, Angeline.
Good, good. Because I know you talk about you. Because I know that you, I know it's not easy to write a book. But what inspired you to write this book and share your personal journey with the world?
Well, what really inspired me was a sense of desperation for inspiration. A way out. To find the truth and to gain my freedom and to basically inspire others. I mean, that's the sense of why I ultimately decided to break my 60-year silence of secrets.
Okay. Okay. And I know that you are a staunch advocate for issues dealing with adult survivors of abuse and trauma, child abuse, mental health, PTSD, quality, patient care, preserving our planet, equality, animal welfare, and animal rescue.
Yes.
So, yes. Okay. So, so what I want to ask you is this. So, regarding that part, so what inspired you to be an advocate of such a
Uh,
worthy cause?
well, because I grew up in that environment and I knew as a young child that I felt that I had a responsibility as a young child because I was exposed to it. There must have been a reason why I was exposed to it, and then I saw so much that I could never say, and I guess my leading myself down that road of seeing domestic violence and also seeing so much abuse that I did not share with anybody and seeing the violence as a young girl, young little girl, and subjected to all that myself, narcissistic mother, domestic abuse in our house, rape, all types of situations, and the violence on the street, the violence in other people's homes. And I just like put that into my heart, and it grew into some kind of passion and some kind of mission that I had to take on. And that even led me into, that that healthcare journey and becoming a nurse and having to care for others and being an advocate. So I felt that it was more of a mission that God put in my lap than it was a choice. And, I'm on a faith journey, always walk by faith and not by sight. And I always felt that I had a spirit on me that protected me through all this violence, and that I'm able to come today to share my story and through my book with so many people to help them, because we need a safe space in order to expose our own drama and trauma and personal I'd say personal journey and personal triumphs, or a way to escape it and to resolve it, and deal with it.
Okay. Right. Yes. And
If that makes any sense to you.
no, it does make sense. It does make sense because, this is why I'm so happy and grateful that you're here on my podcast because, my podcast is a platform for women to break their silence and share their real life stories. So, in terms of that, okay, so let me ask you this. So, can you share a pivotal moment from your journey that significantly shaped your path to resilience and empowerment? What was that pivoting moment for you?
As a child or as an adult?
Both,
Because
both.
this is an onion. You know what I'm saying? This is an
Right.
onion.
Okay. Okay.
So, well, there was one point that I guess always wanting to have love and have that feeling that I was always, everybody wants love from their parent, okay, especially a mother, okay, and I was relentless, and I just kept trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, and there was no way that I was able to do everything I could do, including buy her love. I was not successful. And then I finally went and to confront her after 20 years of leaving the neighborhood. And she still denied, went back and say, I knocked on the door and she opened the door and she said, can I help you? Well, that's a mind blower. After this is the woman who bore me. This is my mother. God put me into her womb. So I said, I took a step back and I said, she said, who are you? I said, I'm Denise De Stefano, your daughter. And she's like, oh, you are. Well, what do you want? And it was like very demonic. She was very dark at that time, but she was much older. And when I was a child, I saw her as a very strong, narcissistic, violent, abusive person. And then I see this weak woman standing in this entryway. And then she went to shut the door on me. And I said, I didn't travel 3,000 miles to confront her and not get something from this. And so I stuck my foot in the door and I said, I have one question to ask you. Why did you treat me the way you did? What did I do to you? And she said, well, get in the entryway. There's neighbors outside. So this woman was still worried about what people thought, it was all about her. And I guess it was at that point that I knew there was no resolution at that time. But ultimately, I did on her, I revisited that later on in the book as I chronicle, and that I went back and I confronted her while she was in this nursing home that she never wanted to be in, that her own family put her in. And I would have never done that to her because she was still a human being and she was still my mother. And I forgave her, because if you can't forgive your abuser, okay, you're never going to get past it. So, but that was one of, the one of the main, I'd say, milestone that decided, I have to share this. Also, when she threw me out of the house without any clothes on and just rip them off and say, you'll go out of this house the same way you came into this world. And that, as a child, is just mind-boggling. And the constant, I guess, the relentless affairs, and what I found out much later about, her drug use, her affairs, the fact that everything she basically said, I'd say 50-60% of it was not true. And, I didn't even know she was Armenian when I was young. So neither did my father when he married her, but he thought that he was marrying a woman that had his child, and she was a ruse and a con, and she was good at it. Ruth was very good at it. I mean, I knew 5 personalities of so many more that she had. So this was seriously an onion, where who my lifeline was my earthly father, and above that, my heavenly father, and the neighborhood, and my grandmoms, and other people who thought they knew what was going on in my life, but really didn't, because I was so good at keeping secrets. And I basically parented my father, because I could never let him know any of this because of his, his health conditions, and the fact that I was afraid that he would, to be quite honest, if he knew, kill her. And then I'd be wrong. I'd be left with the wrong parent. And I didn't know that as a young child when she first tried to kill me in the tub before my confirmation. I was 7 years old, and she was abusing me from the young age of 4 years old. And I was so resilient. And I kept wondering, I kept screaming out to Jesus and God, what is this? But there was a sense of peace, which is diabolical, because I had a spirit on me. And that spirit really covered me until I went to the next situation and the next situation. How I dealt with all these various, I'd say, vignettes that I caught myself into in my life is that I treated myself like a computer, and every situation was a different disc. So that's how I kept myself from basically losing it and going insane, even though I was very close to breakdowns many times, suicidal and depression. Instead, somehow God came around. He gave me what I needed, that warrior attitude that my father instilled in me. And I overcame, and I overcame, and I overcame. And I was not a child that took no for an answer. I was going to win, because I would not let her win over me. And I knew God was always there, even though I would go all the way down. When you think you're all the way down and ready to die, lose it, take your life, he's always there. The Waymaker's always there. And I really, really believe that. But sometimes it's on God's time. So, I'll just break there if you want to redirect me, because
sure.
I speak all day about this.
No, that's fine. I mean, listen, that part, that's in the early childhood, that's not an easy story. That's not easy to share. And you're right. I mean, God is always there for us. At the end of the day, life is happening for us, not to us.
Exactly.
Right. And God is, everything is in God's timing. And every morning I wake up, I thank God for a roof over my head. And I just thank God that I'm alive, because God woke us up to another day to make an impact. And the relentless affairs that you talk about, she was involved in drugs. And when did your father finally find out about
he was
this?
addicted to pharmaceutical drugs, and she also bought, drugs off the street. Yeah.
Oh boy.
He really, I could not believe what type of, my father, I was with my father and the fellows in our neighborhood. And I mean, from them, I learned love and compassion and happiness and fun and comedy and, jokes and caring. And from Ruth, I learned cons and lies and deception and, abuse. And it was amazing. It should have been the flip side because there was more violence in my home than there was on the street. So
Wow.
that to me knew that I could never be safe because my house, well, as long as my father was there, it was a home. But my father, was in business. I mean, he was his, he was a plumber. That was part of the truth. But, he had a business, and victimless crimes. I mean, that's the bottom line. And, you know, um, whatever my father did for me was it was in my best interest. And that's why he said, Daddy, I'm going to teach you to think like a man, but never forget you're a lady. But he didn't realize that he was teaching me survival techniques because he
Mm.
didn't realize the other side of it. At one point when I was 16, he was getting weaker and he did break down and say, because he thought it was better to have a mother than not to have a mother at all, because I was not telling him this, all the truth. And, I would not reveal it. And he said, I'm so sorry. He was driving me to school one morning. He said, to Goretti. And he said, I'm so sorry, that, you know, it, I, this happened. And he just thought it was because she didn't give me love and she screamed and this, and she started fights with him. But that
Mhm.
wasn't it. That was just the surface. I could never tell him because I could never break his heart because I knew how his heart condition was. I knew how loving he was. And it, even though, you know, I just wanted to protect him. And in protecting him, I thought I was protecting myself.
Okay. Okay. Now I completely
Because
understand.
people say to me, how could your father not have known? Well, you know, that's obviously, how could everyone, when the book came out, they go, this didn't happen. That didn't happen. I mean, it was right in front of, you were right in front of our eyes. You were funny. You were, the life of the party. You were such a good girl. And that's what I wanted. I fed off that. Unbeknownst to all these people, that's what kept me alive. And God being in my life and the faith and Jesus and
Mm.
just running to Epiphany of Our Lord Church as my refuge, or whatever I had to do to stay alive. That was front and center. And I felt like, now I had to come to a point where I couldn't go on any longer,
Mm.
because I said, I have to let this out. Because if I don't let this out, I won't have freedom. I won't have my sanity. And I won't be doing what God wants me to do, which is share my testimony to glorify Him and to show other people that He exists.
Exactly, which led you to writing your book.
Exactly.
So now let me ask you this. Were there any challenges you faced while writing this book?
Well, I initially started writing the book. I was in 1991, to be honest. I chronicled things when I was young, and I would hide them away because she would just go through everything. But what I did was in 1991, I was living in Manhattan,
Mm.
Midtown East Side, and that was the first time that I felt that the demonics or the devil or somebody was going to take me out, because I was having a breakdown. I was having a breakdown. I could not, I had no more coping mechanisms, no more things I can entertain myself. I had money. I could buy things for myself. I could go places. I could do things, anything to avoid it. That's why I went from Philadelphia to New York. I thought if I run away from my problems, I'm okay. Well, they're going to always follow you until you confront them. So it was in New York on 55th Street in 1991 that I literally screamed out for Jesus, screamed, "Help me, Father." And basically had a verbal fight with the devil, which sounds crazy. But if anybody knows, the people that have the trauma in their lives know that's what we go through. We scream for help. Instead of, there's so many people who maybe haven't survived it. Like, that's why comedy was a coping mechanism. And listen, like, look at Robert Williams. He was brilliant. He was, nobody would have ever known. And look what happened to him. And then there's, Jim Carrey, and he went over and above, and now he's out there claiming, that God is the way, Jesus is the way, and people don't want to listen to that right now. But, and I was out there, and I was, doing gigs at Caroline's and whatever, just as a coping mechanism, because that was one of my biggest ones. But when that night I had such a breakdown and I was screaming and I was from exhaustion, I ended up sleeping on my foyer and then waking up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and looked around and said, "What's going on?" And I got in the shower, made myself coffee, and it was like I was divinely guided, and I went straight to the computer. I closed my eyes. I just start journaling. And it was 4 months I journaled every morning. I woke up at 3 without an alarm clock, journaled from 3:30 to 11:30. And then I'd get washed, get dressed, and then, join the real world again and start my business or go out for lunch or go out and buy people stuff. Because it just gave me so much happiness to see other people happy, because that's what I fed off of. So, and after 4 months of that, I had the beginning of what is now known to be Out of Respect. And that, I'd say 8 chapters, 9 chapters grew into 21 chapters. And when I initially wrote the book, it was nearly 500 pages. And that was in the, I'd say, past 5 years. And then I had to break it down to what was the most relatable within that book, to bring it down to 300 pages to help people, and then extrapolate whatever I could and just bring it to a second book in the future, which would be the wild things, something like a Ruthless, a life without Ruth, and which were all the crazy and fun things, and how you get in and out because you have that infrastructure. So and shortly after that, somebody read that book in New York, and all I knew was, like, I'd say a few weeks later, I had William Morris as an agent. And who knew from agents? Who knew from algorithm? Who knew from any of this?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Wow. And, I commend you, Denise. I really, really do, for, stepping into your truth and just sharing, all the, sharing what happened. What advice, and let me ask you this, what advice would you give to someone struggling to reconcile their faith with their personal challenges? In other words, if they're going through something similar like you did, what is, what advice or life lessons have you learned from, from the abuse from your mother, and writing the book? What are the life lessons that you would share with someone who's going through something similar like you did?
Well, I think that the one thing was the fact that I was open to a divine, the divine and God. Like, I waited on God. Like, there were situations that I would be in and I go, I don't know what to do with this. And I would literally talk with him. Well, God, where do I go from this? But not everybody is sometimes in that situation. So what I say is the first thing you could do is, because I went through self-sabotaging, I went through all those things. And the first thing I remember doing was telling me that it was not my fault. No shame, no blame, no condemnation. It is not your fault. This was done to you, okay? And you can't take it on as if, this is going to destroy you. And you have to sit there and you have to go through all these things. It's a hard journey. I'm not saying any of this is easy. And I'm saying, but the first thing is to come out with self-love. You have to really, my personal thing was, which is the hardest thing. And I looked into the mirror and I said, you're loved. You were loved. So I pulled out all the pieces. Like my father used to say, Daddy, when you're in a situation, it's like you put macaroni into a strainer and you let the bad out, let the water go and keep the macaroni because that's the good part. And that's what I did. I went back and remembered all the good things and I held on to those and I meditated on those. And then I shared those with certain people. And then I did do therapy when I came out to California to realize that it wasn't me. And yes, this was abuse because we're always wanting to self-blame. And it's not that. It's not that we're bad. It's not that we did this. It's in most situations, it's more what was done to us. Just like when I was raped at 13. I did not ask for that, but I had to find a way to cope with it, live with it, and still go on from it. And I have to say that all this that I went through has made me who I am today. But it's baby steps. It's getting up. It's having faith every day. It's praying every day. It's asking for guidance. We can't do this on our own. We have the Waymaker out there. Whether we realize it or not, he's out there. And he has all these angels. And that's, for example, how did we meet? That's divine guidance. That's divine intervention. So we can share this so others could hold on to something.
Exactly.
Just like so many people came to me and said, oh my God, I read your book. And, because something in each chapter is relatable, whether you're a man, you're a woman, whatever it is, they come to me and they share with me. And this has been going on for over a year and a half. Just happened the other day. I walked through my hair salon and two people said, Denise, oh, I got your book. And, I didn't even think of this, but, I saw in this, I related to that. And I related to this. And then they just open up. Okay. And then they begin to heal in some way if they haven't already, or they begin to acknowledge because they know it's safe. They say, oh, okay, if she went through that and got through it, then I can go through this and maybe I could get some coping mechanisms. Maybe I could, flip it. It's comedy, drama and comedy and trauma. You have to flip it. You have to look at it in different perspectives. And, I do recommend that people go out. I have a therapist. I'm not ashamed of it. In my introductory, I claim that, I say there is an epidemic going on with mental health, with abuse, with people keeping secrets. Secrets kill. And this is what we have to reveal. Doesn't matter what color skin you are, the economic, where you live, it's all across the board and it's global. And it's just growing and growing and growing. And it's getting, now it's not only elder persons, middle-aged persons, children, but this is really, it's like a wildfire. And that old adage, whatever happens in the home stays in the home. Well, that doesn't work because I know, and so many of your listeners know that doesn't work in their hearts, but that was the way of old school.
And I want to piggyback off what you just said, old school, because when I was raised, I don't know about you, but when I was raised, I was told be quiet, like be quiet, don't tell anyone.
Right.
We were taught to be silent. So we were conditioned to be silent.
Exactly.
And I went through domestic violence. And what happens is you end up suppressing your feelings and then forget it. And then that's it. Once you suppress your feelings, then that's it. But you surrendered and you went to God, and you and I connected together. That was divine. That was divine intervention. Exactly. God
Another,
brings, yeah,
uh, yeah, he does bring people together. But another, this is something I really want to communicate to the audience is that your body takes on that trauma, whether you realize it cerebrally or not. Okay. Your body's taking on all this and storing all this trauma. Okay. In your neuro system. Okay. And as you get older, you're less resilient. And the more it happens, the more your body takes it on. I mean, it was easier to take a beating. Okay. And I just thought, okay, a beating is much easier. Okay. Than verbal abuse that happened every day. And, or a rape or a violation of your body. But it's called the anatomy of trauma. And that's what happens after decades and decades because there's so much your body can take and so much your mind can take. And then what happens is that you break down decades later. It could be your maybe your body's breaking down, you don't even realize it, into chronic conditions that unfold in your life. And I know that's happened to me. And immune systems and this and that. It's all connected. And being a nurse and seeing it in the healthcare field, seeing it in, doing my advocate work for, abused children, domestic violence, abuse, rape victims. It's all there. And you just have to have this, you know, peripheral vision. You have to have this latitude and say, okay, this is across the board. And it's just so involved. And you have to break it down into volumes and then take it at one step at a time. Because if you look at this all at once, you're just going to be so overwhelmed. You're going to say, I can't do this. But if you take it step by step, depending on what you're going through, you can do it. That's why, I try to consult and coach and share with various audiences and my audience and other audiences that this is something that you can you can rise like a phoenix from the ashes. You can. And but there's got to be a lot of compassion. There's got to be a lot of understanding, and there's got to be a lot of love, unconditional love. And
exactly.
and that's something I had always, always.
And that's amazing. Unconditional love,
Yeah, yeah,
self love, because
yeah,
self love is so important.
yeah.
And
And I had it from everyone but my own mother. And and later on, I didn't have it affects your relationships. All this affects your relationships. With me, I never had I you know I was always drawn to a narcissist later in life. Like there were two relationships I had. They were very narcissistic and they love bombed me. And at one point I said, I'm going into something where I'm marrying Ruth. See, because that's what you're prone to. So, it really, it comes up and it comes up and it comes up and it comes up and it comes up. But you can stop that, you can cut that cycle, that generational cycle, or that cycle that keeps reappearing in your life. But it takes time.
it does take time. And it's a process, the healing
Yeah,
process. because it took so, because, and you're right. And regarding your body, I mean, talk about, it has a, a physical effect and a psychological effect way down the road. And, body, like some people, now, why do some people choose to just stay in the victim state? Because you talk about rising out of the ashes, you definitely rose from the ashes.
Yes, I
So,
did.
yeah, and you surrendered and you wrote the book. So, for someone who was in a similar situation, what um what advice would you give?
Well, to be quite frank and honest, God was my refuge. And I always went back to that ultimately. Always, always went back to God. Always went back to screaming for Jesus to help me, always went back. I mean, Ruth, she had me, she abducted me. She hired two people after she abducted me to try to abduct me and kill me. I mean, these are insane, insane situations. But it seemed like every time this happened, God allowed something or someone to be around me to pull me out of that. Unless I kept screaming for him and seeing this, screaming for him and keeping the faith as my constant, you know, it's the faith, it's believing and never giving up hope. You give up hope,
Mm.
you know, then you got to call it a day, but no one should call it a day because everyone has hope, you know? I mean, you could be down. I was down one day. I was living, on my own in an alley because Ruth put me out. My father was away. They're saying, where was your father? Away doing business. But do you think I was going to let him know? And in the book, I chronicle so much of that. And
Mm.
I lay it out there. I lay it out there. And I do it in such a raw way because I wanted to be totally transparent so other people know that you have to just keep going. And there were so many times I wanted to give up, but every time I went to totally give up, something came through. And that was
Mm.
God either sending that, the angel sending that, the Holy Spirit sending that. And that's what I believe. And that's what I believed in. And he's still working in my life like that.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer in God and Jesus, and you're an amazing woman. I mean, you are a force to be reckoned with, Denise. That's what I'm those were those words I was looking for. You are a
Well,
force to be reckoned with, but it was God. It was your faith in God and your belief. And yes, life is going to knock us down. It
yeah.
will. Life will knock us down. And no matter what's happened in your life, you were resilient. You were resilient. You had your faith in God, and
And I
miracles
didn't want to, yeah, I didn't want to disappoint. I didn't want to disappoint God, in
happen.
giving in. I couldn't do that, if he was still going to be there for me. I didn't want to disappoint others who really, you know, uh, I was helping. How could I do that? So I thought, okay, if I let this all out, then maybe I can give them hope because the hope is what's what it's all about. It's about that hope. And of course, you know, I just use coping mechanism comedy. And it's the prayer, it's the Bible, it's comedy, it's all your coping mechanisms. And it's, looking in that mirror and saying, you are worth something, you are valuable, you know, look what you've been through.
Mm.
So that going back and saw and seeing what I came from, all those situations, and I would say, how can I give up now? How can I give up now? I and that's what keeps me going. I can't because I believe that you know, he's still working in me. He's not done with me yet. Because if he's still bringing me through, he's not done with me yet.
Exactly. Exactly. And God will bring us through the storms. He will
Yes.
he will see, yes, he will God will bring us through the storms, and those angels are looking out for us, because when we go to sleep at night, the angels are looking out for us.
Yeah. And the storms
And
could be for years. They could be for decades. They could
mm,
be for 2 years. You have to, that's what everyone says, wait on God. That's what they mean, wait on the Lord, because we're more than able. But it's that waiting period in the storms that sometimes take some people out not to dinner, is what I always say. And I try to just twist it. When I used to do comedy, people used to say, "Oh my God," and you can't compare your stories because we all have our own stories. And I used to do stand up, and it was a joke that I wanted to express the abuse or express something so dark, and I would
mm,
stand up and say, oh, I moved to LA and I came out in LA, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, I went through the most horrific time when I was a child. My mother, I had time out, and she made me sit in a corner for 3 hours." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "From where I come from, my time out was the time my mother beat the hell out of me to the time I came to. Now that's what I call time out." So you have to have that. To me, that's funny now, and the audience would laugh, but they didn't
mm.
realize how real it was. So everyone has a different perspective, and you also have to respect and honor that, and share that so they are safe with you.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And when your father taught you to think like a man, but never forget you're a lady. So how has this um, duality influenced your identity and the way you tell your story?
That made me fearless, because my father said, "There's nothing you can't do in life, Danny. Just keep God front and center, and never be afraid. You can be anything you want to be." And he instilled that infrastructure in me because he said, when you go into that room, that's your room. When you get done in that room, you give it back. And it was think like a man, but never forget you're a lady. And that's why I was so successful. That's why I walked into a room. It's not that I didn't disrespect you, or it was just that you're you and I'm me, and I bring this to the table. And it was a man's world back then, because he said, "You're going to have to think like a man to survive." And he was teaching me stuff that he never realized. I think the intensity of it. And that brought me to, when I walked into boardrooms as to, you know, fundraise and develop my healthcare business. And because I was in a man's world, and they would always, shoot like, your profanities, or they would think, "Oh, this and that," and call me names or whatever, joking around. And that was like, I was kind of a Teflon Don in that. I don't care what you say to me. There's nothing you could say to me that it hasn't been said before. That was one perspective. And nothing you could say to me that will break my infrastructure because of what my father, the fellas, and my neighborhood instilled in me, and what I carry. And I honored that. And I just kept walking that line. And once they realized that this piece on this chessboard wasn't going to be moved by them, and if I was going to be moved when I moved myself, then it was okay. They just looked at me sometimes as one of the guys, and that's okay with me, because I knew that I was a lady. But when they crossed the line, I made sure they realized that. And I took all these lessons, and put them into, I say, a remarkable um, uh, luggage of tools that I would pull out when I needed it. You know, all the lessons from the neighborhood, from the guys, from my father, from the old Italian ladies up the street, you know, from everyone, Mrs. Rizzio to Gunjek to this person to Sam the number writer, you name it, you know, they all instilled something in me because to them, I, they just had nothing but love and support and they thought, oh, she's a kid, you know, but this kid was just backing me up and all this knowledge and you know it it rubbed off on me and it became part of my infrastructure and I brought it out with me to be a success to others and you know I went all the way up and all the way down, you know, and sometimes though you're on a road and I was guilty of it, you know, I was on this road and I was like for you know, then the pride stepped in. I was like, oh, now I'm on my butt. Okay, God, okay. You know, I obviously did not make you happy. So now, you know, he's like, okay, I'm gonna lead you. And he would take me to another situation. And I believe, like people say to me, what is it with you? You know, I'm relentless. I'm relentless. I will, even though I'm hit and hit and hit and hit, you know, figuratively today, it's different hits, you know. I just will not give up my faith and will not give up the all the tools and share with the world and to make a legacy, you know, in honor of my heavenly father, but most of all, um, my earthly father and everyone instilled in me a piece of them. That's what I carry.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And you talk a lot about faith. So in your book, you discuss walking by faith and not by sight. So can you share a particular moment from your memoir where this belief was especially tested?
Oh, there's so many of them. Uh, I think that a pivotal point for me was when my father died, when he passed. His, I was just turned 18 going into Villanova, and that was when he was truly, you know, he took, he had a minor stroke. He had 4 heart attacks before that. And ultimately what took him out was a major stroke. But I I went to college because that was something that he wanted for me to get out of that. He said, Daddy, I want something more for you. And um, you know, I was the doting daughter as he was the doting father. And I went to college. And then in November, he turned 62 and he had called me. Well, I kept calling home because I thought he was just out and about because but Ruth would not allow me to speak with him. And finally, I said to her, get him on the phone because I never hit her, never cursed at her, took all the stuff. You know, I respected her and, you know, it's the Bible that says, you know, the parents are supposed to take care of the children. They're supposed to respect the children. But it was a flip side with her. So, and finally, she put him on the phone and I heard the slur in his voice. And at that point, you know, I was in nursing school and, you know, I was a savvy person and I was a candy striper since I was 13. So I've seen a lot. And he said, Daddy, I love you. And as soon as he said that, I even get choked up now. I knew I needed to get there ASAP. So I said, Daddy, I'm going to be home in a few days because I did not want him to say something unknowingly because I already heard the slur. So I said to myself, he had another stroke, or he's having TIAs, mini strokes. So I went to my teachers. I said, I'm out. I got to go. Flunk me if you want to flunk me. I don't care. I got in the car and went home. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to surprise her, element of surprise. So I walked in, I looked to the left. I saw my father slumped in his chair. And I, kind of, oh, Daddy, how are you? As if he was the same old Paulie, And I said, let me raise the TV for you. You want something to drink? He said, yeah, that would be nice, And I went into the kitchen and I said to her, what are you doing? And she said, ha ha, I'm winning. Well, that was it. That was a break.
Uh-oh.
Ha ha, I'm winning, while she's stirring the gravy in the kitchen. And we had a long house. Okay. So I looked at her and quietly I said, I'm not the same little girl. I'm Denise. And if you don't get in that friggin' yard right now, I hate to say what I'm about to do, because now is the breaking point. Get in the yard. And we went out and had it out. And that's when it was the breaking point of, okay, now I'm stepping into it. And she made that day miserable. But then, my father and I said, Daddy, he said, we'll do something tomorrow, Daddy. I said, yeah, we're going to do something tomorrow. And then I helped him upstairs, put him to sleep. And the next day I woke up and he wasn't there. He usually went out, always 4 o'clock in the morning. My father was always visiting, and, breaking stones for people. He was a jokester. And he went to my cousin Frank's house, and little did I know, he took a massive stroke. It was around very early in the morning, maybe 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And he went over there. And I didn't know that. And then Ruth came into the room and she said, if you want to see your father before he's dead, he's at the Methodist. Ha ha. Well, that was a breaking point. And I went immediately to the hospital. The guys were there. And what I did while I was in the coma, I knew that this was the time that we had to leave, both of us. And I asked him, Daddy, let go. You need to let go. You're going to be a vegetable. You don't want to be that. That's not you. And if you let go, you go with God, you'll be free. And then I'll be able to leave and I'll be free. And at that moment, he still did not know how bad it was. But I know when God brought him to heaven, then he looked down and he realized, and he would be very proud of me, that I sustained that. And that he was such a milestone in my life, just something that I would always keep in my heart. And I went home, they wanted me to leave. And then the guy said, she's not ready to leave. And so I stayed with him. I stroked his hair. I kissed him on the head. I left. And then 2 hours later, my cousin walked in. And as soon as I saw him, I knew. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, I left that house after the funeral arrangements. Everybody went back to the house. I was very quiet. I went downstairs to try to get my stash to leave. And she came downstairs and said, this is mine, money. This is mine. Everything was hers. And this is mine. I said, here, it's all yours. Go ahead, choke on it. I don't need it, because I have what I need, and it's all in my heart and my soul. I'll go out in that world and survive. And I have God, I have my father, and I have all the memories that I've taken from my neighborhood. And I went back and forth, but never to see Ruth. And here we are today.
Here we are today. Now, is Ruth alive today?
No,
or
Ruth died a decade, I'd say, a little over nearly 2 decades ago. But I got to see her before she died, and I made it a point. I was not allowed to see her because her sisters, and she She took my inheritance, she took everything, but I couldn't care less. She couldn't take my soul, she couldn't take my heart. And that's just like the devil. She was the devil, because that's what they want. They want your heart, they want your soul. And, and that's two things I wouldn't give up, to the devil or to Ruth. And that's what made me go on after that. I was not going to lose to Ruth. And then my cousin told me where she was, and I went 3,000 miles back from when I was living in Malibu to go see. And I literally camouflaged myself, and I became one of my other cousins. I went with my other cousin, who was a nurse, and she took me and she said, Denise, you better prepare yourself. You're not going to recognize her. I said, of course I am. She's Ruth, AKA she was Mommy Dearest. What are you kidding me? And I walked in the room, and lo and behold, I looked at, there were two beds, and I was told she had a private room and all this. And I passed right by her. And then I said, well, she must be out maybe taking a shower or whatever. And she said, no, Denise, that's your mother. And I looked, and really rage came over me, rage. And I said, okay, Lord, it was like God saying to me, here, I'm giving you a time to resolve. Okay. Now is the decision. And he was watching me whether to forgive her and go on, or to violate her. Okay. And she used to call me horrendous words. So her slave, the M word, you name it, she called me. And so she said, she's not going to hear you. She has, there's nothing. So she was all cramped up. And I said, watch this, because as a nurse, I know that the spirit does hear, and I whispered in her ear, hey, Ruth, it's me. Remember me? All the curse words, all the brutal verbal language. I'm here. What are you going to do, Ruth? Look at you. You're in this bed. So it was like I went through that sparring with her. And then my cousin said, what are you doing? She's not even going to. And then I said, watch this. And let's call her Christine for a better word, because I don't want to out my cousin. And I went to the other side, and I said, over here, Ruth, how about that? And you think you're going to get out of this room alive? Now we're going to settle the score, but you're not worth me giving up my soul and giving up my God. And then all of a sudden she started to shake, and my cousin pulled back, and she said, stop it. That's just her neurological system. I said, no, it isn't, Calais. And I went back to her other ear. This went on for 20 minutes. And I closed.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, okay, Ruth, now is the time that God is watching me, and what my father is watching me, and I had to be so tenacious to get to this point, to resolve that I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to forgive you, because if I don't forgive you, I can't live. Okay. God won't allow me to live, and I won't have my sanity, and I can't do his work. So you go, Ruth, wherever you go, but I just want you to know I win this time. Just like she confronted me in that kitchen. She goes, I'm winning. So I trumped her. Checkmate. And then I went out there and I said, I forgive her. She always wanted me to say, I love you, but I could not do that because I needed to be shown love to say love. Wow. And that's basically a synopsis of Denise's life till present day.
Exactly. Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? We are coming up to the top of the hour. So what I would like to, I would like to end the live with some wisdom. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to write their memoir, something that's similar to yours, but is afraid to share their personal stories? Because as we both know, people there are some people out there who feel ashamed in sharing their stories. So, what advice would you give them?
Well, one advice I would give them is that what I did was I had aliases. I've changed names and situations in my book in order to protect other people. And that's one thing. Another thing I would give them is it's going to be a hard journey, but it's going to be something that's going to pull you out from the darkness into the light. And no matter how many times you fall down, you get right back up. So while you're in that writing journey or that therapy journey or coming to unfold to who truly you are, you just take it one step at a time. You walk by faith, not by sight. Every time you think you're going to give up, close your eyes, okay? Because you don't want to see it. You want to do it, okay? Just do it. And that you have to believe that you're unbeatable. Also, how I started my writing process was to go chronologically from the first point of abuse or trauma or drama or attack, and then whatever that age was, what was the incident? And that's how I made the model and outline of how I approach my writing. And then from that, I was able to go back and read it, which is a whole nother level of seeing it. And that allowed me to go to the next step. So with that mental approach, the falling down 27 times, it's about getting up that 28th time. It's about walking by sight and not, walking by faith and not by sight. And never, 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 never think that have any condemnation, that you're at fault for anything, and guilt cannot be, and secrets kill. So you have to go out there and you have to go out there and tell your story. And if you have to use aliases, if you have to journal just internally and share it with a safe spot initially. So it's a platform.
Exactly. And in
I
fact,
hope that makes sense. I hope
that makes a lot of sense
I'm all
because
shooting from the hip.
yeah, no, you're not. No, actually, this is great because you know what it is, Denise? You're speaking from the heart. And this is a raw and real conversation. And you kept this conversation very real and raw. And guess what? I've used Elias's name to protect myself because,
That's what you
yeah,
do, because a lot of people, make stories and or blogs or this and that about people they know, but that person they know is them.
exactly. Walk by faith, not by sight, and share your story. And I feel so happy and grateful that you shared your story today on my podcast. I'm on my platform. Let's break the silence with Angeline.
The
Because
eye of
guess
the tiger, the eye of the tiger.
the eye of the tiger. I love
Be
it.
like
I love it.
Rocky in the ring. Just keep getting up. Apollo has to go down.
Exactly. And you keep saying, get back up. That's right. Because guess what? Failure is a part of learning. Failure is our teacher. And
Exactly.
we fall down, we get back up again.
Right.
Because
And
that's what God wants us to do. He doesn't
right.
want us to live a fear, we're fearless.
Yes. And when God's doing work in your life, just like a plant, the plant has to be pruned every so often in order to grow.
Exactly. Well said. I like that. And oh, Denise, so where can people buy your book out of respect?
They could buy it on Amazon. They could buy it on other platforms. If you Google it, there's a whole bunch of platforms. So on Amazon, you could also go to www.outofrespect book.com, and there's an audio trailer there. There's a place you can either order it from me, autographed copies, or you can order it right out of the store. There's a media, there's updates of what I'm doing, coaching, things of that sort, and ultimately also the upcoming audio book, which will be out in a couple of months, which I'm very happy to say, and that's going to be very impactful because I'm doing it, the narration.
Exactly, exactly. Oh, I can't
So
wait
that
until the
they can
audio
get
comes
me.
out.
And also, when you go to the website, it'll lead you right to Out of Respect at gmail.com, or just go through that. You can send me messages,
Okay, good.
and there's a whole list of things you can basically pick from.
Awesome. And also, and thank you so much, Denise. And
No,
these,
thank you. And thank you to your audience and everyone listening. I appreciate you. And, I say never give up.
that's right. Never give up. Never give up is right, Denise. That's right. We keep fighting the good fight. And and also what I want to say is all the links will be in the show notes. So this podcast episode will be uploaded and live on my Spotify. And my Spotify channel is Let's Break the Silence with Angeline. And also you can go to my website, Let's Break the Silence.com, for coaching programs. And if you would like to book a call with me, a breakthrough call, or be a guest on my podcast show, please go to let'sbreakthesilence.com, because guess what? We all have a voice. Our voices matter. So on that note, Denise, just
Yes.
wait in the green room right after this broadcast. I'm going to end the live right now.